Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Jonathan Johnson, Justin Fisher, and Guillermo Peña Panting.
Hello, hello, buen provecho, as we say. I guess we're still waiting on people. We're good to get going. Good. All right, well, first I'd like to say thanks, Brad, for putting this panel together and getting this conversation going. I think in my area of work, I probably enjoy the best when I'm able to cross the regulation side, nonprofit side with the business world and seeing where they mix. I think that's one of the fun parts of working with this network. So I'd like to start very quick. So Jonathan Johnson is the CEO of Overstock, and Justin Fisher is co-founder and CEO of VeriBlock. But best thing I think is to give you each about a minute to just say what you're working on and give a quick introduction of yourselves. That way, it's better to see what's most important to you.
I'm Jonathan Johnson. Overstock has invested in 21 different companies that are using and advancing blockchain technology. Some of these, a small number of them, are involved with cryptocurrency, but most are using blockchain in other areas like voting, land titling, supply chain, central bank digital currencies, things like this. So very interested. Anytime someone gives me a mic and asks a question about blockchain, I'm ready to go. And I've ruined plenty of Thanksgiving dinners talking about it, so I'm sure I can do it for your lunch too.
Thank you. Go ahead.
It's a tough introduction to follow. My name's Justin Fisher. I'm the co-founder and CEO of VeriBlock. It's a project that uses Bitcoin's hashing power to secure other blockchains, and it helps make Bitcoin more green. So instead of Bitcoin using all that hashing power just to secure itself, it can use that hashing power to secure other blockchains. And this creates a dynamic opportunity to have trees of chains all secured by Bitcoin. And instead of them competing for hashing power, they can reutilize the existing hashing power of Bitcoin. And there's another project I'm also co-founder and CEO of. It's called EMI. It's the Ethical Market Making Engine. And I can't go into too much detail, but it's a provably fair, crowdsourced way to bring liquidity to existing markets. And it provides it in a more transparent manner. And welcome you to visit em.me and read more about it. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think the conversation, the Bitcoin blockchain conversation came to Alice events probably 6-7 years initially. And it's come a long way. I think now we're having the conversation in the middle of lunch during the event, so which I guess it's moving up. I think during these last couple of years, there's a lot of conversation on what is Bitcoin and if currencies and monetary regulations on it, and but I think it's helpful for us, at least to hear more directly from the industry on regulations and hurdles and what needs to be done in order for projects and organizations like yours to prosper in this space. Many times as organizations grow bigger, we see that the hurdles start appearing sometimes. Sometimes it's been you work open in the space, and then eventually someone realizes they can tax you, or that there's some oversight, or and they come up with a regulation, or there's existing things in the system. So initially, I guess to just a clear, where do you guys stand separating Bitcoin from blockchain, just to get the audience on the same page here?
Yeah, if I can take that one first, I'm going to use an analogy. When I was a freshman in college in the mid-'80s and received my first email on a CompuServe account, I thought, this is the internet. I have entered the internet. And it turned out that the internet is so much more than email. Email may have been the first, what we'd call today, killer app on internet that most of us used. But the internet was a technology that made the transfer of information nearly free and nearly frictionless. Well, that's what blockchain technology is. It's a technology that makes the transfer of digital assets nearly free and nearly frictionless. It takes out trust brokers, which I would call intermediaries or rent-seeking middlemen, and lets technology be the trust that lets two people who don't know each other exchange an asset. Bitcoin is really the first killer app that's built on blockchain technology. It's a digital currency, but blockchain technology is so much larger than that and can be so much more than just cryptocurrency.
Thank you. I think that's a great place. You've been in the space for a while in the internet economy. What would you be some of those solutions that you've seen using these technologies?
I think that Jonathan provided a great high-level overview. Obviously, veteran in the space for a long time. We met back, in 17 maybe? And we were back in the game before it was cool. And one of the things that I had the opportunity to do was work with my co-founder, Maxwell Sanchez. And I got a first-hand deep dive going down the rabbit hole with him. And here's some things that I took away from thousands of hours of brain-numbing concepts, paradoxes that are just hard to comprehend. You know, two opposing ideas having to live in the same space in a superposition at the same time. That's what lives underneath the concept of Bitcoin. So what I like to tell people is, imagine trying to prove to somebody on the other side of the world that you wasted $100. You know, how would you do that? You could take a picture of a dollar bill that you burned. You can get a witness. But I don't trust anybody on your side. I don't trust your digitization. There's nothing about what you're showing me you can actually prove. And that's what makes Bitcoin, the concept of a blockchain, unique. By making all these people consume electricity and seek to solve a problem, there's one thing we know for certain. How much computational power, i.e., how much energy consumption was required to prove that. And every 10 minutes, you have to prove that. So I'll stop there because I don't want to get too technical with the audience, but in the sense, think of it as a thought experiment. How do you prove to somebody else in the world that you, on the other side of the world, that you don't trust, you don't like, that you wasted $100? Don't think too much about why that's important yet. You'll probably learn more about that as we go on. But it's about trust, proof of trust.
Thanks. So you mentioned also the connection with the energy sector and the data center. Jonathan, do you know, what is the types of needed infrastructure that this new internet, not even new now, because 12 years seems eternal now, I guess, in blockchain stuff. But what are the infrastructure needs that the industry continues to need or that are growing opportunities in the economy, energy, data centers, and such?
So your question directly was how much data center?
Well, the industry needs process computing energy. What's the basic infrastructure?
Why does Bitcoin use so much electricity? What's the value in that? Well, security is not free. It's not frictionless. An analogy would be, just a lock on your door. In a world where everybody could trust everybody, we wouldn't have to lock our doors. We wouldn't have to put our notebooks in our safes when we go to hotels. So trust, I'd rather live in a world where I don't have to trust somebody, i.e. Bitcoin, versus having to navigate trust. So the computational power that's consumed is actually, from where I live, from how we perceive the space, it's more efficient than all the friction that's created through the current economics for doing any type of digital transaction. The theft and the loss and the Brinks trucks and all the buildings, the skyscrapers with the electricity running and the air conditioning and people driving back and forth to work, et cetera. When you add all that up, what's the price of that computational power? What's the price of playing video games every day? Everybody's not talking about the energy consumption of all the NVIDIA cards that are consuming electricity to trade skins and to play video games. Why aren't we beating beating that space up? I'm not suggesting it, but if you're going to go down that path, it's a slippery slope.
Thank you. And it's one of the areas where we have to, as a public policy community, where we have to understand better how to help is also how to, what are the things to look for projects that can be more serious than others or that could have a higher success? What are some of the things that you and your organization have looked at when deciding to invest in companies that are in this space? What are some of those things that you look for?
We're always looking for applications that solve a real world problem. So for example, in much of the world, proving ownership of real property is very hard. You can't go down to the county recorder's office and record your property and prove that you own it so that you can sell it, so that you can divide it, so that you can borrow against it. What we're doing is using blockchain technology to digitize titles, make it easier for people in large swaths of African countries to say, we own this property. And as soon as they own it and can prove they own it, they can sell it, they can give it to their heirs, they can borrow against it. What it really does is it unleashes dead capital. I know hardly a single entrepreneur that didn't start his or her business with a loan against their home, a second mortgage. If you're unable to prove you own something, it's hard to do that. Blockchain technology is a great solution for that problem. One more example, and then I'll release the mic, is there are so many farmers around the world, in the United States and elsewhere, that when they're borrowing money to buy their seed and grow their crops, and when they deliver their crop to the grain elevator or to the coffee broker or to whatever middleman there is in that process, they don't get paid immediately. It takes 90 days to get paid. And for someone who's borrowed to grow, to spread that payment out or to delay that payment is a real problem. With blockchain technology, we've invested in a company that lets the farmers and the growers, the moment that they deliver the grain or the coffee, be paid in a cryptocurrency that can be converted into US dollars or Mexican pesos or whatever the local currency is. That has turned out to be a real boon for farmers. They don't get cheated by the grain elevator operators who sometimes pay in 90 days or sometimes decide to pay less than 90 days. It's been a real boon for growers in places like Mexico where they have the option to hold their payment in US dollars or in pesos, where the inflation rates are different. And many of them like holding greenbacks, because even in our transitory inflation rate, it's still less inflationary than some of the countries where these growers are working. So these are real world problems that are solved by blockchain technology that's not necessarily crypto based, but based on making an asset digital and transferring it more simply and easily.
And efficiently.
And efficiently.
I'd like to just add something to it's a space I'm also passionate about. When you look at title, it's really essentially a chain of custody. And when you look at when we're talking about energy consumption, et cetera, when you look at the traditional chain of custody, just break it down simply, right? You've got a human being or a series of human beings who are in charge of tracking, processing, managing this data. Each one of us in this room here today has lied at some point in their life. None of us in this room can be trusted any better than anybody else in that regard. So humans, by definition, will lie, cheat, and steal. Now, what I like about Bitcoin is it capitalizes on this inefficiencies of human nature and turns it into a product of proof, digital proof. So in a chain of custody, once I put an artifact into the chain of custody, there's a cost. And then the longer it sits in the chain of custody, the more humans that touch it, the more probability that there could be corruption. In a blockchain of custody, and it's also prohibitively more expensive because it's inefficient. Every time somebody touches the data, you have to record it. All these things cost money, the archives, the data, et cetera. In a blockchain of custody, which was our original project that led to VeriBlock, the blockchain of custody is the exact opposite. And this proves, in my opinion, the utility of what makes projects like Bitcoin indispensable as we go into this digital age and this new world that we're moving toward. Namely that when I put something on a blockchain of custody, i.e. Bitcoin, when I take that data and I memorialize it on a blockchain, every 10 minutes, as in the case with Bitcoin, every 10 minutes, it becomes more secure. So I pay a fixed cost to get into the blockchain, and then it gets infinitely more secure because the ability to unwind that transaction and take it backwards in time becomes exponentially and even physically impossible. So that's one of the reasons I'm really passionate about the blockchain space, particularly Bitcoin. So when you hear things that Bitcoin doesn't have utility, ask yourself one simple question. People say, what's behind Bitcoin? It's a Ponzi scheme. What's behind it is the world's greatest form of digital proof. And in a world where digital artifacts are being manifested, proof, evidence, cameras, all of these things can be memorialized in a blockchain and proven in a court of law, second to none. That's the utility behind Bitcoin.
Let me just comment and say about one real world problem that cryptocurrency or even central bank digital currencies solve. And that's the problem of the unbanked. In the US, 8% of our population is unbanked, 26% are underbanked. They're the people that use payday loans that we see on corners of major cities. In Africa, 90% of the population is unbanked. And in South America and the Caribbean, it's 50 or 70%, depending on what country you go to. If you're unbanked, it's really hard to participate in the 21st century economy. You don't have a credit card, you can't wire money, you have to take cash to a Western Union and pay an exorbitant fee to send it home or pay a bill. Cryptocurrency lets anybody with a cell phone, in effect, have a digital bank account. They can now buy things on the internet, they can pay their bills that way, they can store their money in a safe and secure way that's not in a coffee can in their sock drawer, in their drawer in their dresser. It lets people leapfrog into an economy that they've been shut out of because of anti-money laundering laws, know your customer laws, all these things, these regulations that have grown up around the banking industry that make it hard for large swaths of the world's population to participate. Cryptocurrency and central bank digital currencies solve those problems.
So those are areas that probably many of us here would be interested in working on regulation to allow more to join the economy in a formal way, right? Move away from that informal economy that sometimes is expensive to be a part of as well. So on that issue, Jonathan, you were mentioned backstage also on how voting systems and election systems can be used for to secure the votes, or what are areas that are being used that you think that are of interest to the crowd right now that we could be? It's a happy democracy crowd here.
When you think of your vote, you can think of it as a digital asset. You only get one of them per election, per race, and you have to cast it. And once it's cast, it shouldn't be cast twice or more than once. And it can be something that's digitized. We've invested in a company called Voatz, V-O-A-T-Z, that has done over 100 elections in the United States, state, municipal, and federal, using blockchain technology. You go on your smartphone, you prove who you are with your county clerk. The county clerk sends you a ballot through your biometrics. You reprove who you are. And then you cast a vote that's safe and secure, that is then sent to the county clerk via blockchain technology. The county clerk doesn't know it's you, so they can't tell how you voted, but they know it's somebody who's allowed to vote in their election. It then generates a paper receipt or ballot that's auditable. All this is done instantaneously. Who's this good for? It's great for our military, who's often overseas and has a very difficult time voting. Sometimes they vote by email, sometimes they vote by fax. Rarely do they vote in a secret ballot. It's good for the disabled, who getting to the polls can be so difficult. Frankly, it's good for anyone that uses this. It's safe, it's secure, it's auditable, and it will produce a result that we will know the winners the night of the election, and not think we know the winners and wake up to new winners the next morning as paper ballots are found and processed in a way. It brings trust back to the voting system.
Thank you. Justin, we met you through the digital chamber, partially, right? So
Yes.
about how do you use a digital chamber? How has it been a factor to help the industry, and how does it interact with regulators in DC?
That's a great question. The Chamber of Digital Commerce is a great organization, particularly around the digitization of what's happening in the economy and how fast things are moving. There's got to be a voice that speaks for people like myself, Jonathan, and these types of initiatives, and even people like yourselves in the audience who are now beginning to touch the boundaries of this space. It's affecting all of us. The tax complications, the regulatory uncertainty, all of these things are just creating so much friction around what should otherwise be dead simple. And we're trying to take a great group of people that come from all walks of life, from all different parts within the industry, and I don't know if I want to use the word lobby, but communicate with our Congress and our lawmakers, to help explain and teach and show them, where these things, come into play, as Jonathan was saying, and how can we make maybe new regulations that can help, grease these rails, provide better efficiencies and more opportunities for more people. And that's not just hyperbole. That's really what we're doing. In the chamber, I'm honored to be part of it. There's people who do real work there that are absolutely amazing. I serve on the Token Alliance and the Token Steering Committee and the Executive Committee, and I work with people, and I sit in on these meetings, and I'm blown away by all the work that they're doing. So they're doing a lot of things that are really effective. They are making change. We've got many more politicians that serve us understanding how these things can help, their constituents. And there's a new conversation that's getting better and better. And the Chamber of Digital Commerce is one of the unsung heroes of our space.
Guillermo, I just want to mention, we were a founding member of the Chamber of Digital Commerce because it has an important role. Overstock began accepting cryptocurrency in January of 2014. Relatively early adopter. And I have to tell you, in that spring of 2014, I was in Washington, wandering the halls of the Capitol on various meetings, and every staffer I met with, every regulator I met with, every member of Congress I met with, didn't want to talk about the business I wanted to talk about. they wanted to talk about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And I wondered why, and it became readily apparent that the reason they wanted to talk about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency was they wanted jurisdiction over this new technology. Well, jurisdiction is a euphemism for the ability to regulate and squelch. That's what they wanted. And so it's important as your groups get together and understand what Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are and what blockchain is, to make sure we're protecting liberty. This is a technology. We don't regulate databases. Rarely do we regulate technology. We may regulate use cases, but I think because this is new and popular, there's a real sense that it must be regulated. And frankly, strangled in the crib. That's where places like the Digital Chamber of Commerce, and I know several of your groups that have created regulatory sandboxes in your states and jurisdictions to let this technology grow and flourish and be proved are so important.
Thanks for taking us into the next the sandbox subject, which I really want to bring up. For the last couple of years, we're seeing sandbox regulation show up at local levels or different countries that have an open regulatory mentality. How would you explain that sandbox regulation systems work to allow these type of businesses to flourish?
Can I start on this one?
I'll defer to Jonathan on this one.
No, I mean, I'd love to hear what Justin has to say, but I think sandbox regulatory systems can happen a lot of ways. I think Wyoming has been a pioneer in the banking system and the ability they've given for banks to be set up that involve cryptocurrency. Frankly, many of our investment companies we've invested in have had a hard time getting bank accounts because most banks don't want to deal with companies that have Bitcoin. That's a problem. In fact, even Overstock at one point got fired by our bank because we accepted cryptocurrency. There's a $1 billion company being fired by a bank. There's got to be sandboxes that let the regulated entities, like banks, be more comfortable advancing this technology. State of Utah's been great. When earlier in the day we had Michael Melendez from Libertas talk about sandbox regulation that's been allowed in Utah. For small companies to start and practice using this, if we're not careful, and if we don't think about how regulation impacts not just the incumbents that are already winning, but also the new companies, the innovators, that if they win will really change the world and change our lives. If we're not thoughtful about what regulation does to them, we'll never know how the world could be changed for the better.
Thanks. So when we hear about sandbox regulations, you mentioned that there should be some type of control also on the size of the operations within, because when is something too big to be in a sandbox? Should it move into a more regulated system, or what are some of those conditions that you think for businesses to operate within the sandbox system?
So I don't have a direct answer to that question, but it's in the field. We're launching Emmy now, and just in order for us to get our project to where it can finally be launched, we have to form 5 entities across 3 different countries. I want you to just think about the complications behind that. And by the way, all outside of the United States. So we call that jurisdictional arbitrage. And we're looking at a future where in Argentina, they reset the currency. The government runs away and prints it into oblivion, and the people are left with wheelbarrows full of cash. This has happened time and time again in many of these countries. So now these same people have the ability to do currency arbitrage. They can perform their service in their given location. They might not have the mobility that other people have around the world. they may be unbanked. Well, now when they get a hold of a cryptocurrency, they can convert it to any number of fiat stable coins, because maybe they need to pay taxes at a later time and they don't want volatility. They can switch to other projects that they like. And countries are going to be competing more and more and be more and more accountable to people in regards to runaway printing and how they just, print money. And the people at the bottom don't get the money first, they get it last, right? First it goes to the banks and then it trickles down through loans, et cetera. Well, who gets those loans? I'm not getting those loans. So getting a little bit off track, but when it comes to the jurisdictional arbitrage, now all of a sudden the world is flat. And this is going to make not just governments accountable, but businesses accountable as well. So I'm looking at the regulatory conundrum and all the nuances. If you could be a fly on the wall and see the amount of energy and bandwidth and time and just mental exhaustion just trying to revolve around the regulatory uncertainty, and you're trying to do a legitimate project in a cutting-edge space that's fundamentally changing the world and will continue to change the world, and you're being chopped off at the knees. There's something that's got to change. That's why I'm proud to be part of the Chamber of Digital Commerce. They're doing great things there. I'm probably more of a student. I think I just focus on sharing my frustrations, and they find a way to convert our frustrations into real words that make it up to Congress, and hopefully we can see things change in America, because America should be leading the way, just like we did with the internet.
Well, but frustration is good to share, especially with people that are involved in policy, because that's how you find what hurts. That's how you find what's really limiting an operation or growth or even getting established in a system. So frustration, I think, is just a bunch of opportunities to work on regulation. That's one of the things that we like sitting at Eléutera. We like sitting frequently with people who are operating businesses and listen to their problems. That's one of the easiest ways to get quickly into solving. But do you find that?
Just one quick comment. Just from a regulatory perspective, just look at what happened recently with Ripple. If you look at the stock chart on Ripple, it was going up pretty much at a 45-degree angle quite consistently from its inception. Then the SEC intervened to protect investors. And the price plummeted probably 70%. So I just find it ironic that in the light of protecting investors, you harmed them. And there was no warning. It came out of, and that's the type of things that aren't good for investors. It's not good for progress. It's not good for innovation.
I'd comment there. There's really two types of regulation. There's regulation by enforcement, which is what the SEC has done with Ripple, and that's horrible because it's gotcha regulation. People don't know if different coins are a security or a currency or an asset. And sometimes a little definition, a little regulation that lets people know where the lines are so that we can color inside them is really helpful. I think part of the problem, how it relates to cryptocurrency and coins and non-fungible tokens, NFTs, has been that the regulators have been unclear. Personally, and I'm maybe a little cynically, I think they've been unclear on purpose so that they could regulate after the fact through enforcement. The other way that regulation happens and hurts is it thinks about the past and not the future. So for example, Bitcoin in the United States is taxed not as a currency, but as an asset. So if you have some cryptocurrency, some Bitcoin, and you choose to spend it by buying a lovely black leather mid-century modern couch on Overstock.com, you need to know two things about how you're going to be taxed. You need to know the price of the Bitcoin the day you purchased it or received it. That's your basis. You actually need to know three things. You need to know how long, the duration that you've held that Bitcoin, and you need to know the price of the Bitcoin the day you used it to shop on Overstock. If you've owned it for less than a year and it's appreciated, you're going to pay ordinary income tax because what you've spent is not a currency, but the IRS has deemed it an asset. If you've held it more than a year and it's gone down, you're going to have a capital loss, and you can offset it against your investments in Tesla that have gone through the roof this year. That's not how currency works. We've looked at the past and we've said, well, this feels like a stock, so let's treat it like a stock. But it's being used as a currency, and it's being strangled in its use as a currency. Another example is so many jurisdictions have a prohibition against internet voting. Well, that's fine. The internet's not safe and secure for transferring assets. That's why we have brokers, we have banks, we have insurance companies that are intermediaries there. But when you're using blockchain technology, it does become safe and secure. And so this prohibition against internet voting gets applied analogously to blockchain voting. That's something that needs to be changed. So regulation that looks to the past and not to the future, and lack of regulation that then is regulated through enforcement are two big problems that we deal with in regulating new technology, and in particular, blockchain technology.
Thank you. I think those are very helpful elements to use while keeping in mind while setting up new regulation or changing actual regulation. And I would say maybe also pairing to what you just mentioned is when that regulation is done, you have to know when to tax, how to tax, what to tax, but also what are the rules for the on-ramp and the on-off ramps.
And we should always remember taxation is theft. Shouldn't we always remember that?
Which another great reason I think that the blockchain industry is great to bring to this event, because it seems like we're hand in hand walking together in this system.
Just for the record, I don't want to be audited, so I'm gonna officially disagree.
Smart. When are we moving away from a Wild West industry? Is this still a hit or miss industry? Are we moving into more mature, or already into? Is it a mature industry?
I think it depends on where we are. We're certainly more mature than we were a decade ago. The fact that there's organizations like the Chamber of Digital Commerce that lobby and advocate for this on a national level, the fact that so many of your organizations are doing this in your jurisdictions means it's getting a toehold. But I don't think it has full footing as a mature industry yet. I also think it depends on where you are. I know there are some countries that are adopting this in a bigger way. They have a central bank issued digital currency. They want to be on the front edge of this. They want to help their populations become banked. That feels more mature and a little bit less Wild West. But in the United States, I think it's still, there's a lot of room to, if we're not Wild West, if I use a pioneering analogy, we've probably done the initial trailblazing, and maybe there's a rutted path, but there's no paved roads to where we need to go yet.
I think if you take a look at the current state of fiat, that's the Wild West. So when I look at things like Bitcoin, that's a stable store of value if you believe in the future of digital proof in a decentralized, trustless, transparent, and permissionless manner. As I was telling Guillermo earlier, the this is the first time I've been invited to speak. I'm new to the organization as studying it, and I looked at what the ethos was of your organization. And I thought to myself, I said, wow, this looks like a pretty polished group of people trying to just adhere to simple, good principles of, empowerment and all the things I grew up knowing and learning in the United States of America. So seeing where things are today, I'm proud to be speaking here today with everybody. And I think that if you really want to make a difference in your organization, it is important that you look at blockchain initiatives, especially because of what I've learned about how you navigate charity through accountability and how the organization structures itself around this, as I understand it. I'm not sure if that's entirely the case, but that impressed me. And I think blockchain can play a role, or certainly distributed ledger technology can play a role in also moving money around to these areas where people are unbanked. How do we get money to them quickly and easily without friction? And crypto can be a great asset and tool for helping the initiatives that I believe this organization stands for. And I'm certainly willing to do what I can to help.
Well, I hope you continue coming to these events and give us more ideas on what we can do. I like to move into another area of this conversation that's been hot lately, and it's decentralized finance, or DeFi, and decentralized autonomous organizations. So would you be willing to explain a little bit what decentralized finance is doing right now?
Justin, that's yours.
So, we're highly focused at VeriBlock, and as I like to say, we keep our heads down and we focus on the technology. You have to have a laser beam on. I mean, between the advent of DeFi, DAOs, NFTs, and NFTs are just, it's interesting how marketing can play a role in I don't want to say reinventing, in repurposing a given narrative. So, the idea behind DeFi is that you've got these smart contracts on projects like Ethereum, and there's no friction to get into the smart contract. All I need is a computer. And I don't like to say that it can't be stopped, because ultimately, I don't own an electrical power plant, and if the government tells me I'm going to go to jail, I'm probably going to stop conducting a certain behavior, because I like my perceived freedom. That being said, DeFi is certainly creating amazing opportunities. I'll give you an example. Here's a good example of DeFi. Imagine a smart contract on Ethereum. And imagine you want to place a bet on your favorite sports team. Well, you can go to this smart contract and you can put up a bid for how much you're willing to gamble and what you want the point spread to be. And then that's it. You're not paying any points to a bookie. And through a free market system, these two parties who want to gamble with each other can eventually reach a point where there's going to be an order matched and there's no bookie. And the smart contract is going to go look at oracles in the real world, like maybe ESPN.com or Yahoo.com. So imagine you're on your phone, you want to place a bet, and all this is obfuscated away from you. You know you can trust it. And you go and you place a bet. What's that going to do to the sports books around the world? What's it going to do to all the bookies around the world? What happens when you take away, the 10% VIG, as they call it, when you gamble? Oh, and by the way, you don't have to worry about somebody coming and breaking your legs. If you don't have the money, you can't gamble. So we're living in a world where that's now possible. So when I look at DeFi, and one of the reasons I was in the ICO of Ethereum was at 17 cents. I sold it, most of it at 20 though, so I can't take credit for where it is now. But because Ethereum back then crashed, it had a DAO attack and $50 million was stolen. That's not a lot of money in today's crypto space, but it was a lot of money back then. And somehow Ethereum navigated through that and isn't considered a security, but everybody else is, but that's another conversation. So I've seen the good and the bad of DAOs. Decentralized autonomous organizations, as Plato said it best, the problem with democracy is that you're subjected to the vices of the many. So and I'll be brief, about another 60 seconds. At Emmy, we've created a new model. We get decentralization out of the gate, but decentralization through competition, closer to capitalism. So in our case, we launched a token, we created a token, and then we give the source code away for free. So we take that source code after it's been released, and we spin up our organization that's going to accept that token and perform this service. Doesn't matter what the service is. Anybody else who wants to use that software can copy it, but they must also accept that token. So now anybody in the world can run their own little franchise, their own little nation state within our ecosystem and compete. And if they do a better job, then their ideas are going to be adopted. The thing about a DAO is you might have the majority of people who want to take the thing in the wrong direction. You're going to have to suffer from the vices of many. They may get altruistic. They may be idealistic. There may be a reason for why they want to do something. So decentralized autonomous organizations, I think there's work to be done there. I think it's interesting. I think there's a place for it. DeFi is not going to go away. Even if I do think you're going to see regulations come to DeFi. It'll still be decentralized, but it'll be closer to the internet, right? You can get on the internet, but at the end of the day, you're going to need an off-ramp and an on-ramp. And that's where the regulators are going to come in. So let the DeFi propagate, do its thing, and then when you want to get on or off that ecosystem, then you settle up with the regulators, et cetera, and you take care of all that business. It's just a cleaner way to do it. It'd be like if he and I are having a conversation in a negotiation to do something, and we have to do it before a judge, and everything's got to be recorded every time we talk. Why don't we have our conversation? We'll come to an agreement. Then when we go to sign the contract, then that gets published. So I think regulation is going to come into the DAO game, and I think it's going to come into the DeFi game. I just don't know how, when, and where, and I don't think it's going to collapse and disrupt the industry. I think what's going to happen is, to your point earlier, the cream's going to rise to the top, and the other stuff is going to turn sour.
Thank you. I'd like to open up for questions. I'm not sure if there's a lot of questions, or did we get too deep into this? All right, we got one over there.
Right there in the middle, white shirt.
Thank you. This is great. So a really quick question on the value or the fluctuation in the value of these cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. You spoke a lot about the utility of the coins eventually, and I want to believe it. And I want to love Bitcoin. A few weeks ago, it's $67. This morning, it's $67,000. This morning, it's $46,000. How can people trust the value and use it as a utility when the prices still fluctuate so much? And I think that's where you're getting some of the ire from regulators and governments. I feel like until it settles down, right, and it levels off, you're going to continue to get the ire from big government who wants to protect people against the volatility. If you can speak to that.
Let me say two things on that. There's no question it's volatile. It's volatile compared to the dollar. And I think it's volatile for a reason, but first I want to address why I think it's less volatile than the press makes it out to be. As Justin mentioned, if you're in Argentina and you're making a wage and you get paid in an extremely inflationary fiat currency, there are three things you do when you get paid. You go buy stuff because it's going to be more expensive tomorrow. You turn it into greenbacks because they're relatively stable, or you turn it into cryptocurrency, which even as volatile as they are more stable than the local currency in many countries. Now, why is Bitcoin in particular so volatile? Here's what I think. Today, most of us get paid in dollars. We segregate it into this is what I'm going to live on, and this is what I'm going to invest and save. Bitcoin is in this is what I'm going to invest and save. Now, when I invest in stock, I don't buy my couches with that stock. I don't buy, donuts with that stock, it's to save. And so there's relatively little in circulation. If there's a point when more people are paid in a digital currency, and I think that could be any digital currency which transfers to Bitcoin or Ethereum or a stable coin or a Fed-issued digital currency, then I think that volatility goes away, because part of what we're paid in is what's going to circulate every day in what we spend. So I think as long as it's largely seen as an investment, it will have high beta volatility. When it becomes more treated like a currency where we're actually spending it, I think it will become much more stable. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, just a quick point to that. If I could tell you how many times I've suffered through a 90% drawdown on crypto, but only to hold it for dear life, I'm glad I held it. And for the times I've been shaken out, I've regretted it. So, Ethereum's a great example. I was telling anybody that would listen, it's 17 cents. And again, I'm not giving you investment advice. But if you can't, if you're affected by the volatility, you've probably got too much on the line. That's how I would say it. Fundamentally, there's 50 million millionaires in the world. I just read the statistic somewhere. And, there's only 21 million Bitcoin. And I think there's, 10% left to mine, Jonathan? Roughly 10% is left to mine. So, the opportunity to own a single Bitcoin is leaving. I see another hand up over here.
Yeah, you got a mic right there.
The world leader in developing central bank digital currencies is China. China's rolling out a CBDC for the Winter Olympics in February, and their attraction to a central bank digital currency is that it's a tool for total surveillance of all economic activity and the abolition of privacy. Every economic transaction will be surveilled by the PBOC. So I'm trying to understand why Mr. Johnson is investing in CBDCs and why, given that they're antithetical to human freedom.
Well, the way China is using CBDCs is the way China abuses all kinds of good things. Just because China has taken something and is using it in a bad way doesn't mean it's bad. China uses money. China uses labor. Should we not work because China uses work? I look at what's been done in the by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. I look what's been done by the Nigerian Central Bank, which is bringing people into the 21st century, letting them have a digital currency that participates. It's not being monitored. It's being used in a free and frictionless way. So I'm not involved in what China's doing. I am involved what's been done in Belize, what's been done in the Eastern Caribbean, and what's being done in Nigeria. I hope that addresses the question.
I think we have time for one more
I
question.
see your head shook no. We can talk about it afterwards.
As an appreciative Overstock customer.
Thank you. Thank
There
you.
you are.
A lot of my house is decorated with Overstock. Thank you very much. The questions that I have are beyond the currency applications, which is a separate discussion and has challenges all of its own, as governments have long indicated that controlling their own currencies is a prime desire so that they can inflate currencies and spend, etc. But I'm fascinated by all the ways in which you are using blockchain, whether in the Hernando de Soto title approach, solving the voting problem. The one where I'm confused is if you look back at the early history of Lehman Brothers, they started in the early 1800s essentially as first cotton and then commodity brokers, because they realized that if they could pay farmers right away for their crops, and they were the middlemen, then they could facilitate those transactions. I am not clear, other than the fact that you are paying with digital currency rather than cash, what the difference is. But are you acting as the broker, or are you somehow, how are you determining the price, and how are you not being the middleman in that transaction?
We're not determining price. Price is set between the farmer and, for example, the grain elevator operator. It's just facilitating payment. It also, their application uses an Internet of Things, and so they can see it transported, they can see how the crop was watered, the quality of crop, all of that helps facilitate more quick payment. It's not to be a broker in the middle, it's to facilitate quick payment. One comment, you mentioned Lehman Brothers. I think blockchain technology has a great place in the stock market. Today we trade, when you trade a stock, it's settled in 2 days, or trade plus 2 days, T plus 2. There's no reason that when you trade a stock that can't be settled immediately, where the trade can't be the settlement. Blockchain technology lets that happen. I also think when trades settle immediately, there's less wiggle room for fraud. Things like naked short selling or things like that. So I think anytime things happen immediately, you're taking out risk of bad behavior.
Well, thank you. Please join me in giving them a round of applause and keep industry leaders coming to this event.